needed to scale quickly, and they needed that automation and that intelligence. We saw self-driving networks becoming an area of investment, and we started to see much more interest around the software-defined branch. And so finally, in the future enterprise stage, we saw this focus upon autonomous digital native networks. So you're going to start hearing this phrase, digital native networks, more and more often. It's about being resilient, it's about being secure, it's about being intelligent, and most of all, it's about being automated. So all the challenges that have been faced around networks and network management and network security will come to the fore in the future enterprise. Talking about recent events around the DDoS attacks in New Zealand, this is not a New Zealand thing. This is something we're seeing globally, is this attack on the new network, the new network profile. So you think about businesses, they've got a broader attack surface now. You think about what's happening in business continuity phases and this rapid deployment of technology, the rapid deployment of devices. And, cyber criminals see this as an opportunity themselves. We talk about crisis as an opportunity for yourself, but actually cyber criminals are not stupid. They're looking at how they can use the weaknesses that have been exposed in organisation to conduct these types of attacks. So this is not going to go away. This is actually going to ramp up, particularly as the network becomes more distributed, we move to edge computing and a cloud working environment. So New Zealand is embracing technology. They're not holding back. They're not thinking we're not going to spend any money. In fact, 70% said that in June that they were adding new projects to their transformation roadmaps. And 71% say they're willing to take risks on emerging technologies. So we're starting to see this investment in emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, next generation security. We're seeing investment in robotics, augmented reality. So they're not willing to sit on the sidelines and just wait to see what happens. And a further 76% have completed or in flight with network transformation prior to COVID-19. And when we actually asked them another question, they said that this is actually an area where they have had the biggest positive impact on their COVID-19 response and preparedness. So think about all that other technology investment, it's the network transformation that has had the biggest positive impact. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but it's just showing how New Zealand businesses are actually focusing on budget growth. It's pretty modest. So if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see the percentages of growth, budget growth expected from New Zealand and Australian organisations, and these have remained pretty static over the last 3 months. But the big news story is there are more businesses planning to increase their budgets than decrease their budgets, both in 2020 and 2021. I think the Australian story is very interesting because we've actually seen those numbers definitely drop back. They were actually on par with New Zealand a couple of months ago, but now with what's happening in Melbourne, we're starting to see this disincentive to increase budgets occurring much more rapidly. So talking about network transformation, there are different areas where we're seeing investment. And we've asked this question around what are you doing as a result of COVID-19 and what are your long-term plans? So no surprises here, the biggest focus at the moment is around the optimisation of networks for remote working. So there was a lot of work going on in that crisis stage and also in that business resiliency stage. Cloud connectivity optimisation. So obviously as part of the remote working, cloud becomes a much more attractive proposition to organisations that weren't necessarily investing before. We're seeing at the moment a lot of network and security convergence, and there's a lot of discussions going on about how do you integrate the both? How do you make sure that you have security embedded in your network transformation? But if you actually start to look about what the long-term prospects are, there's much more focus on the enterprise network transformation through SD-WAN. So SD-WAN in New Zealand has been we're probably a little bit lower in terms of maturity than other countries. But looking at these long-term plans, I expect that we're going to see much more investment over the next 18 months to 2 years. And cloud is also playing this critical role. So talking about cloud before, I'm not going to go through this in detail because we don't have time today, but you can actually see that in different phases of the crisis or the reaction to the crisis and the journey to transformation, businesses are focusing on different things, different functions for the cloud. And in the business resiliency phase, we see this optimization of operations to create resiliency, but we're also seeing this network resiliency starting to come into fore. When they move into the targeted and the future enterprise phases, there's much more focus on cloud as having a role around the development of innovation, targeted investments to drive the growth in the organisation. So I was talking a little bit before about SD-WAN, and SD-WAN deployment is playing a role in the COVID-19 recovery. So we've asked businesses, how are you using SD-WAN? How is it helping you through this time of COVID-19? And there's 4 particular areas where businesses say that it is becoming really important. It's around the effective utilisation of multiple transport links, the consolidation of network devices and functions, reducing dependency on proprietary hardware vendors, and of course, enabling business continuity. So these are areas that were not necessarily being talked about so much 6 months ago, but it's really come to the fore as businesses think about how SD-WAN can be used to mitigate their current network challenges. And going forward, we're going to see much more focus on SD-WAN. So that was a very brief overview, talking about what are you facing in terms of your challenges, particularly around the network. How are you helping your customers alleviate their pain? We've talked to a lot of the businesses around New Zealand, and they're saying that we're looking for empathy from our providers. We're looking from empathy from our vendors. And this is a key part of the recovery process. So that movement from the crisis to recovery, network transformation is critical to success. Look at how you can use it in your organisation to flatten that curve. It is a key part of that operational resiliency. Modernising while operating in a crisis, there are risks and we see them arising every day, but the rewards are actually very high for businesses that do invest. Invest for the future, those new capabilities, look at trust, infrastructure, intelligence, innovation. Businesses in New Zealand aren't afraid of taking on this challenge, and we've already seen that. So think about what you're doing. And the branch of one, this is a concept that's starting to emerge, and in part is to do with network transformation. So working from home is driving this concept. They're driving the concept of a branch for one. How do you create that network resiliency when you're outside the perimeter of the organisation? Businesses have spent years on building and hardening their networks, and now we're moving to this branch of one model. What are you going to do as a business? So I'll finish on a note from my colleague in Europe. He's talking to some CIOs and CEOs a couple of months ago, and one of the things that he said came back to them is that your COVID-19 response will define your reputation for the next decade. The network is going to play a key part of that. We're already seeing the media reports about the DDoS attacks in New Zealand. These are the sorts of things that are going to affect your reputation. So having that network transformation is going to be critical. So I know that was a very, very brief overview, and a lot of those areas we could spend probably the next hour talking about. So I hope it does help you think about your network transformation, creating that intelligent network. And now I'm going to hand it back to Simon for the panel discussion.
Great, thank you, Louise. Fascinating and great to see the cadence of research through this period of change that we're going through. I think we've always considered this industry and the sort of users of this industry that the change is really rapid in our industry, and that's what we've been paid to in the last 6 months, where change is just accelerated beyond anything we could have thought possible. I mean, a couple of interesting takeaways for me. I think that final slide, your reputation will be defined by your response to this, and it's a phenomenal opportunity for all of us to really stand up in difficult times, and it's good to see that come through. But also the view that the biggest determinant of COVID impact is the network availability. So that's a really interesting point as well. Well, I'm going to hand over now to Julie, and Julie's going to moderate a panel discussion. And so, Julie, over to you.
Journey that we've had inside of Cisco. So I'm going to talk to you now as the internal IT department of Cisco, not Cisco the business. We have, being a large enterprise ourselves for a tech company, we have invested heavily in our infrastructure, but despite that, COVID was like something we've never experienced before. Pandemic was a new scenario for us. We regularly have employees working remotely. We have great collaboration tools, a robust network, a security architecture, but work from home was kind of a plan B, and then our plan B suddenly became our plan A. So for us, that early phase that you described, I really like those phases, was for us about, how do we connect everyone? How do we make sure our employees are safe? How do we make sure that they're productive and that they can support our customers during this time? So we did have a VPN infrastructure, but we had to make it, we had to focus on resilience of it. We had to focus on capacity. At that time, we really doubled down on the software capabilities that we had already been putting into the network. So we had already been on the SD-WAN journey, but I think the priorities were different. Our priority for SD-WAN was probably about reducing service provider costs before. It was more of a cost optimization play, whereas now it became a way to improve the user experience and improve productivity for our employees by really controlling and managing the traffic, optimizing our network traffic in a new way. So, for us, that was big. There was a lot of change management that we had to take care of. We had to align staff and resources and change some of our processes. But in general, I would say that first phase was shortened and that curve was flattened because we did have those technologies in place. And what we feel now, because we knew the world was changing right before COVID, we already had we were seeing the results of mobility and cloud and, more mobile workforce was changing our need for what our network needed to do. But this really accelerated that for us and affirmed our strategy because the network has been the thing that has got us through this crisis for sure. And we realize what an important asset it is for us. Bringing security to the front with your network just makes so much sense to us. And using software-defined constraints, looking at the network through software lens and being able to apply software capabilities to our network gives us scale. It hardens our security and it makes it easier for us to manage our network by using data and analytics and assurance. So we feel this is just speeding us along our journey. The part that's also interesting about the continuum, I thought, is that it's not really a linear journey for us. We're finding that you go forward, you go back, and each of our markets are a little bit different as well. So we have some countries that are really far ahead and we're looking at future and we're looking at what will the future workplace be? What do we need our network to do? And then we have some that, it's still more in the recession phases where we're really looking at the targeted optimization. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So really, really good stuff. I'm curious to know what the others on the panel think about it. So maybe we'll start with you, Monique. How did you feel about this and how it relates to TNG?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. Yeah, look, for us, very similar story to what you've just said. We had already embarked on an upgrade for our network, which a lot of it was aged components. I think we had some, very small bandwidth, not very good resiliency, very manual. The old network where you actually had to physically visit sites, and we didn't have the visualization tools that we've now got. So we're actually probably 60 to 70% through our SD-WAN journey, and getting really good hardening of the network. As you said, we also had a VPN enabled because we did have staff that had to work from different sites and sometimes from home. So we were probably reasonably well poised when we had to suddenly everybody pack up and ship out. Probably the one thing that caught us out was devices. So a lot of our staff so we have people who work in operations and finance who still had the thin clients, which don't work well from home and can't connect and all sorts of things. So it was on our plan to replace those. So we had to accelerate purchase of the right sort of user equipments. But it really resonated with me, that the continuum, and we were probably quite lucky that we were able to sort of jump the dip. I like that, Louis, you said there. That was quite a good leap the dip, whatever you said. Skip the dip, I think it was. And I think it's it'll be different for every company, but most of us were struggling with mobile workforce, making sure people have good performance from wherever they want to work, making sure we are safe and secure, and that we've closed up as much as we can. I mean, we'd just gone through, quite a few cyber attacks. We'd had a few years ago, before I joined Turners and Growers, now T&G Global, they had a ransomware attack, and they'd already closed some of the loops. But it's always about being vigilant, because I think, as Louise said, you never know when that next attack is going to come, and what's an opportunity for us is also an opportunity for cyber criminals. So security and performance are just two of the things that all of us in our roles need to be really mindful of, and constantly continuous improvement. It's not good enough to get to a certain point and then rest on your laurels. So that's probably, I really, really appreciate the insights from IDC. And I think most people on the call will say, yeah, it sounds just like me.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Monique. Steve, what are you hearing from your customers throughout this? And do you think this relates for your customer base?
It certainly does resonate. When I look at, I guess, the experiences leading into COVID, from an NTT perspective, we were quite lucky. We'd run a BCP exercise, a paper manual one, just to run through our own BCP, just to make sure we were able, and this is prior to thinking anything of COVID. And we had left the workshop thinking, yes, we really need to test this, but unknown to us, COVID was around the corner and essentially shut down. And we were probably lucky that we did skip some of that dip from our own learnings and our ability to have tested our BCP plan. But if we look at the COVID reaction in the first weeks leading up, probably first week leading into COVID shutdown, there were a lot of organisations who, whilst had the technology, weren't prepared for everyone working from home. So a lot of organisations had their VPNs already set up. However, they were only for 30 to 40% of the business. And when COVID came, that essentially meant 100% of people working from home, or that 60% not working from home and not being productive. And so we saw a large uptake in security services for upgrades to these VPN concentrators or access into the corporate network. We also saw an increase in the requirement for bandwidth into those organisations. And that's not to, then you take into consideration other organisations that have contact centres. So how do you get your contact centre to work from home? How do you expand the contact centre itself and all the infrastructure that goes with it? And so that's where we started to see sort of the move towards cloud. Monique talked about the devices, where to get your device of a supplier to the marketplace. The distributors had run out of devices, so Obviously, Monique got in early and got hers, but a lot of people were unable to do that, and so we're stuck without that. And that really comes back down to that BCP planning. But yeah, certainly a lot of effort in that first 2 weeks to help organisations get up and get running.
All right, it's really great to hear that you guys were in a good position, and hopefully most people on the call found themselves in that similar area. But I do want to talk about challenges where we are now on that scope, where we are in this journey. Each of us, what are the challenges that we're still dealing with, and what are some of the strategies that we're using to get through those challenges? And I'll start, and you guys can think about it and bounce off me. Feel free to. I mean, because I think for us at Cisco, one of our biggest challenges is just the economic uncertainty that we're heading into. What I'm seeing is we look at that future workplace and we're not sure what it should be. No one has a crystal ball. So the way we're trying to address it is we're thinking about how to add agility into the business. So, being able to, spin up capabilities and bring back capabilities as things go forward and back dynamically is something that's important to us. So, we're looking at how we can leverage cloud in a different way, how we can, what do we need to do to spin up workplaces, physical workplaces up and down. And so this network strategy is really a key part of that, being able to turn things on and turn things off. So that's one of the big challenges. Where are we going to, so we're going to invest in the ability to be able to have that agility in our business. I think another challenge for us is with recession, budget shrinking is really, really difficult, right? So we have to divest in order to reinvest. Yeah, we have these ideas. We want to invest in our infrastructure, but we can't do that without money, and we're not getting more money. So we have to really make tough decisions as an IT department where we can cut costs and where we can stop doing things so that we can reinvest in what's really important to us. And definitely our infrastructure is one of those areas that we're going to be doing that. We're looking for automation to help us with this as well. Automation is going to be key to us in simplification and driving down cost so that we can invest in the right things. So, we want to move away from dealing with boxes to dealing with architectures instead, and using software to give us scale. So that's something that we're trying to do. And then the third one, and I hope all of us speak to this because it's so relevant right now, is just dealing with the new cyber challenges that we're all facing. I think around the world, we're seeing cybercrime go up in New Zealand. You don't have to look far to see what's going on with the New Zealand Stock Exchange and all of the incidents. And these new cyber threats are really causing us to think about security differently. And for us, the network touches everything. So it makes sense to have security in our network, and to make sure that we're looking at security, about not less about places and about personas, and starting to think about identity, and so that we know who you are, we know where you're coming in to us, and we know what kind of device you're on, and that will differentiate the security, the access that you get to our resources. So we're definitely looking to the newer technologies to achieve that. Would you like to share some of the challenges that you're having, Monique?
Yeah, sure. So those of you who don't know, what was called Turners and Growers, now T&G Global, is a fruit and vegetable grower and exporter. So we're a very, very large global exporter. So for us, the big challenges isn't just New Zealand, it's global. And how do we get our produce and our goods out to the rest of the world, which is more impacted than New Zealand. So very disrupted supply chain for us, which means economic, but our center is New Zealand. So, the economy for us, the global economy, which obviously affects everyone in New Zealand, whether you're an exporter or importer or just a service provider, we're all affected by global trends. So, but we are physically affected as to whether we can get our produce offshore. So tightening of the budgets, absolutely. Again, we're kind of lucky that we were, food is an essential service. So we have probably 30-40% of our workforce maybe 30% had to stay in, and obviously with all the secure protocols in place around, screens. So we had to physically have a new setup and be able to have social distancing within, like pack houses and cool stores and things like that, which the logistics were quite hard. So I guess if you think to the future, what would have been fantastic would have been to have a lot more automation within some of the actual manufacturing sites, or, they're not manufacturing, but the pack houses and things. And that really will rely on very, very responsive and secure networks, which we don't have at the moment. So we've got pretty good security coming in. But if you look to the future, people are saying, how do you manage to continue your supply chain without too much manual intervention right now, especially in the food business? Well, certainly in fruit, which is historically, we're a 120-year-old business. It is still very manual. People still think, like farmers, and there's not a lot of digital trading that goes on yet in that space. A lot of that is just historic. So I think if you look forward, as you said, we would need to be investing much more in automation and making sure that your networks and your systems can cope with, the seasonal trends, the volumes, and stay, while still staying secure. And I guess for me, having that volume of people, I think Steve mentioned, the numbers of people that suddenly were working from home, our volume was huge. And so it was all about providing the right bandwidth. But how do you make sure that your person at home who runs their own, Wi-Fi and modems and things, where's the security on that end? How do we make sure that, we can know who's coming in so that you can actually protect your actual, business devices? There's still a lot of work to be done, I think, for us in terms of actually having that control. So that's where we will be investing. We have, had also some economic impacts, obviously, so has everyone. So we are actually relooking at our budgets, but there hasn't been a huge call for me to slash my IT budget, which is good. I think the business recognizes, that they trust that we're going to do what we need to do to keep the business going. It's one of those things that, they don't notice us until something goes wrong, but it's nice not to be, I don't mean it that way. Of course they do, but there's a trust that we will do the right thing. So I think that's where we'll be looking to, hear what others are doing as well in this space and solve it together.
It's really good to have that trust in your partnership with your business, by the way. That's fantastic. Steve, what about from your view? What are some of the challenges and what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, look, hey, Monique brought up we're running our businesses on our employees' home network, and when you break that down and you think about that, if you work for a multi-million-dollar business or $1 billion business, in some cases, there is a reliance on that home network to provide your products and services back out into the marketplace. And so, with everyone working from home now, that data, the IP that's contained within, which is generally contained within your corporate network, is now out in a home network. And it's really important to look at, how do we secure that? How do we, and not just secure that network? You need to do it economically. So it'd be easy to extend your WAN out to every home employee, but you can imagine the cost of that. So how do we get smart about delivering a service that is secure, but also cost effective? But also you have to take into account then the privacy. So you are on someone's home network. They want to have their own privacy as an employee or staff member and want to be able to do the things that they want to do. But at the same time, the business needs to be able to ensure that the links are secure and there is sufficient bandwidth for that customer experience and their ability to do their job. So those are things that one of the things we're looking at in terms of how do you keep your employee connected, but how do you keep their privacy safe? And I think we need to think about that. And the other side of that is, I guess, from a WAN perspective, we saw a large increase in the requirement for bandwidth across the time when COVID is in place. But as people come, to and fro from from home to their place of employment, you don't want to have services which are fixed cost and you don't know what they are. You need to be able to have those to be ramped up and ramped down and required when they're needed. So from a WAN point of view, and even from a security point of view, how do we connect back to the cloud? How do we connect into corporate data centers? But how do we do it in a different way that says I can adjust my service up and down as required? And that comes back to where am I best to spend my money? So I think from our perspective, those are things we're looking at. The other side is, as people are working from home and outside the bounds of the perimeter. I'm not sure where the corporate perimeter is anymore, but a lot of the security services that are available available within the corporate environment are now not necessarily available from a person's home. So your web protection, your email protection, all of those sorts of things need to be thought about. So from an NTT perspective, it has changed a lot for us. We are looking at things in a very different way, and for the first time, I think in a long time, the industry now needs to consider the way in which we deliver those services and the costs that are associated with them.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of weigh in, because as we're running low on time, a little bit on future and what future looks like. Louise mentioned the branch of one as a concept, and I'm quite curious to know with all of you, what do you think the future is going to look like for your business? I guess I'll start with Cisco, in that I definitely believe that we're not going to be going back to what we had, and I think that we have been fundamentally changed and foundationally changed in how we do things. I think for us, I'm hearing some businesses say they're going to be 100% virtual from now on. I think for us, it's going to be probably a hybrid world. We'll probably have, some of our workers permanently work from home. We'll probably have some that come in occasionally, maybe once a week or less. And then we'll still have those people that are going to be fixed to an office based on the role of the type of job that they do, the facilities dependent people. And so we're going to have to design our future around all those scenarios and make the experience equal for any scenario that you're in, and quite flexible. But that's probably how we're seeing things evolve here at Cisco. I'd love to hear, Monique and Steve, what you guys think it's going to look like for your businesses and the businesses you work with, Steve. Yeah, maybe Monique, you can start.
Yeah, sure. So absolutely. What you've just said, Julie, is that T&G Global had just recently sold its big, so we have a huge property out in Mount Wellington in Auckland, south of Auckland, and that's because it's close to transport and it was a hub. But we had different office space there, and about a year and a half ago, a year ago, we'd sold that, and part of that was we didn't want to be sitting on buildings, because for us that's an asset that we don't need to own at that point in time. And so we were looking to move to a place that was, and the idea was to consolidate. But now with COVID, it's made us think, well, how big of an office do we need? And we were pretty far behind the times. I know a lot of especially tech companies, your telcos, if you go and visit either Spark or Vodafone, they were already set up. They were some of the leaders in usable workspaces, and you come in and you don't have a fixed desk, right? You've got a locker, and they're all really wired up. Really, you can open your locker on your way into work and order a cup of coffee. And so they've got that set up already, because that's the space that those high tech companies are thinking in. Well, for a fruit and vegetable grower, that wasn't even on the horizon. But now we're thinking, what is the future office space, and what should we really be investing in? So I think we're going to be a lot smaller footprint in terms of brick and mortar, and we've already seen a lot of, as you said, Julie, a lot of people have said we're not going back into the city, so buildings are going up for lease. I mean, it's changing the whole concept of a work environment for all of us, and where we need to be and how we need to interact. However, the people side of it is we are naturally social creatures. There is no way that my team, in IT certainly, they still want to be connected. They love working from home, by the way. Their productivity has actually gone up. because that one thing that I was trying to get them to do was not have so many disruptions. You know, people walk up to your desk and you're in the middle of solving some deep problem and they go, "Hey, wait a minute," and you go, "Oh." But anyway, they still want to socialize. So I think you do have to have that mix. So we are working on what Steve mentioned before. You've got to be able to have that secure office of one, branch of one from home, but still, I think, have a place to meet and greet and have the technology that, like we're using today, to really connect with people. And then physically, you still have to be able to connect. So I think we're definitely, most people would say we're going to have a hybrid. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. Today, there's probably 10 people in a reasonably large office here in the middle of Auckland. And it's quite interesting because our Wellington offices are generally around about 50 to 60% utilised, even as we've gone through each of those level down to level 2 and level 1. So they haven't seen much of a change. I do think it will be a hybrid model, and I guess that's why when we start to look at the hybrid model, what does that really mean? I know through lockdown, on a call, a video call, competing with my son playing Fortnite, my view and my ability to take that call and especially if it's customer facing becomes a big issue. So once again, I come back, how do we create this office of one? How do we make sure that it is secure, and then how do we make sure that it's economically viable? Because if you have an organisation of 4,000 people, if you just do some numbers, they're fairly high numbers to add to your budget. So we need to figure out how do we deliver that, and how do we do it in an economical way. And there are ways around that.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've all experienced that work from home challenge with prioritizing the bandwidth of the home. So yes, the technology has to be able to answer that. So Louise, I'd just like to call on you. So you presented the data, right? What you're seeing in the market, what IDG is, you're doing surveys with people on a regular basis. Now you've heard from all three of us our different stories from our perspectives in the industry. Is there anything that came out that was a surprise to you, or does this match with what you're hearing? Just wanted to see if you can match those up for us.
Yeah, I think they're definitely what we're hearing, and it is changing. It is changing, and I think businesses are thinking of that hybrid model and how it's going to work. So, the old approach around network and the perception around what actually forms a business network is changing, and with that threat landscape, changing, we're seeing businesses thinking about how they can use new tools. So things such as managed detection and response tools. They're looking at things such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and even blockchain. So there's that people haven't really been talking too much about that previously, but we're starting to see how can this be incorporated into those modernised networks. There was actually a question that's come through on the panel and talking about the future office culture, and that is also something that needs to be, you're going to have all this change management is part of it, but how does this fit with your corporate culture? How does this fit with the culture of security in your organisation? Have you been relying too much on technology itself? So I think there's going to be a whole lot of change happening around, or work around, how do you create the culture for that branch of one or working from home. It's going to be completely different. So I think, what Monique and Steve talked about, that definitely what we're seeing. And it's not just something that's happening in New Zealand. We're seeing this in other countries as well.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you brought in the human side of it, because it is so much as well as the technology. There is this huge cultural and human shift that we have to make as well. So I want to thank all of you for participating in this part of it. I think to summarize what I've heard today, COVID has definitely changed the trajectory for all of us and our businesses, and very much maybe it is going to be something that defines our business and how we come to market moving out into the future. You know, I did like that quote, Louise, that you used. I think all of us have confirmed that, you know, the need for a robust, intelligent, secure network is critical, and more critical than ever, so that we can be agile, so that we can drive down costs, so that we can move to further automation and use data and analytics. It is going to be something that is important for all of our IT organizations, and something that we're going to be investing in. And Louise, I think, you know, this human side, the culture, is going to be something that's not easy. It's something that we're going to have to work closely with our business and with people to understand what's needed in that area moving forward. We also didn't talk much about the skills. You know, there's a different set of skills sometimes that are needed to manage networks and to look at our infrastructure in these new software-defined ways. So I think that's something that, you know, sometimes, you know, partnerships are very good in this way, where we can use, you know, trusted partners to help us get through this change and through this transition period. So yeah, it's been a really interesting conversation. Yeah, and thanks Monique, Steve, and Louise for walking through it with me. I'll hand it back to you, Simon.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of our panelists. Really interesting discussion, I think, this afternoon. There's two, I guess, flavours of what we're looking at as we go forward. One being the technology, and you know, sometimes we take that for granted, the technology, the ability to have, you know, video conferences or video calls. You know, not so long ago, this was Star Trek only technology, right? And we sort of take it for granted. It's amazing to have. I wonder if we'd had this pandemic 10 years ago and had to shut down businesses 10 years ago, just how greater the impact on our economy might have been without the ability to keep a lot of organisations going through the use of technology. And I think perhaps in years to come, as we look back on this and people write papers and do PhDs on it, the role of technology might be finally understood in terms of the sheer impact and the ability to maintain operations and business going forward, along with all the social functions that it's served as well. So that's an interesting point to me. The other one is the cultural side of things, and you've talked about it a lot. Some really, really interesting insights out of that. And the only thing I would add to that is the cultural challenge. Kind of, we've gone through a crisis, and it's relatively simple to maintain a culture of enthusiasm and effectiveness in a crisis. You've got a banner to rally people to. We just need to take care as we go forward that the crisis fatigue doesn't kick in and we start to lose people along the way. So as business leaders, we've got a lot of work to do and a lot of learnings to generate around how we do that, how we not only maintain a culture, but how we create culture and how we welcome people to businesses, and how we build new teams remotely, whereas we might have had an off-site, you know, and spent a day on a plan on a page. Now, how do we sort of manage those sorts of things going forward? Just an incredible the speed of change that we all got to keep up with. So really interesting times for us all. So again, thank you very much, Louise, Monique, Julie, and Steve, for your time today and for your insights and your knowledge. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who's joined us today. Appreciate your time. I hope it was valuable. Feel free to reach out to any of us if you've got any further questions. And with that, we will sign off today. Thanks, everyone.